Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you for Wednesday, March 19th. We had a winning day yesterday, even though it was 1-1. If you made the play on the hockey game on the money line, which I did, and luckily, because that money line actually really dropped, man. So the market moved in my favor for sure. It looked like it was heavily indicating on Utah, and then they go ahead and they lose 7-1 or whatever it was. So wasn't that just great? I'm looking throughout the day. I'm like, holy crap, that line crashed. Like, this is going to be a good play and a good number on Utah there. I think they're probably down to like plus 120 something on the money line by the time the game went off. But I think if you did play it just on the money line, that plus the Oklahoma State win in the NIT, I think still wound up being a win overall. It's a very small win, but I'll take it. I mean, it was a decent win for me. It was a win of like 1 unit because I put I bet to win 3 units on each game. So that's what it wound up being for me last night. But Utah, that game, yeah, I mean, it was a loss. They should have lost, but it wasn't as much of a blowout as it looked, I don't think. Like, they gave up an unassisted shorthanded goal early in the game. Things just totally unraveled. I don't know if there was an empty net at the end or whatever, but it got way out of hand, man. Even though I think Utah actually won the face-off percentage and they were the more physical team in the game, didn't really matter. And the shot disparity, I don't think was that wild either. So not really statistically a game that would be a 7-1 blowout. Oklahoma State tried to blow the basketball game for me as they started out hot. They had a double-digit lead early in the game, blew the whole thing pretty much by halftime. I think they fell behind, and then they reverse course and retook the lead and wound up getting there and winning and covering for me and doing so in somewhat easy fashion towards the end. So I will take that in that NIT action. We do have more NIT today. I'm going to play one game. I have some leans in some of the other ones. I'm going to play an NBA game, even though I think the line is kind of crazy. I just don't want to pass up the situation. So I have 2 plays today, similar to yesterday, and that's what I'm going to do. There is a short hockey card today, and I'll talk about the MLB game that's going on right now that I'm not playing. Let's talk about college basketball, man. We got the NIT continuing here. UAB is at St. Joe's. Of course, like I said yesterday, these first-round NIT games are all at the location of the higher seeds. This is at St. Joe's, at Philadelphia, in Philadelphia, I should say. St. Joe's down from 5.5 to 5, 56% of tickets, only 52% of the cash. Money coming in on UAB, driving that line down. The tough thing about UAB is that they just played in the American Championship game, and they were pretty close to being able to steal a bid into the actual NCAA tournament. So when they were that close to getting in, and I believe they got in last year as well, it's maybe a little bit of a hangover spot for UAB coming into this one. So I don't quite want to do it. St. Joe's got knocked out at least a round earlier than that in the A10 championship, in the A10 tournament, I should say. So UAB, I think, played right up until the end. They played on Selection Sunday, so they have a quicker turnaround time as well. So St. Joe's has a little bit more rest, so I don't really understand the line move there. I don't really agree with that one. It would be St. Joe's or pass on the side for me in that one. Samford at George Mason. George Mason down from 7.5 to 6.5. Money coming in on Samford. I do agree with that move. 54% of the tickets on George Mason, 57% of the cash coming in on Samford. Just like with UAB, George Mason played right up until the end, man. They were not only right up until the end, they were playing on Selection Sunday, trying to steal. I think they probably would have, I don't know if they would have stolen a bid or if VCU would have gotten knocked out, because they played VCU in the A10 championship, and that game pretty much went right to the wire, man. So George Mason was even closer than UAB was. UAB was kind of down by a decent margin right near the end of that game. George Mason pretty much took VCU right to the wire, and now they're playing at home. I believe they're kind of a slow-down team. Let me see. And they've been overrated all year. As I've said, they're 34th in luck index. So, Kemp, I'm telling you all year that George Mason's not as good as they look. They don't score that well. They play good defense, in the top 25 in defense, and they're very, very slow, so they don't really profile as a team that's going to cover a large spread like that. So that's not great either for that. You like that side. The thing I worry about Samford is that their defense is really bad. So obviously George Mason is the better defense. Samford plays really fast, so George Mason will slow them down, which will maybe throw Samford out of their game. So there's There are some like pacing mismatch, some kind of mismatch elements in this that I don't particularly love. I do still agree with the Samford side, though. And Samford got bounced after they won the SoCon last year. They got bounced in the first round of the SoCon tournament. Not the first round, but the first round that they played in, which I think was the quarterfinals. They entered the tournament and immediately lost to Furman, I think, who almost won the tournament. And it was not a bad team, but Samford has extra rest here. So the rest factor and the fact that George Mason was that close to getting into the tournament, I just don't love that. But I don't love road teams that much in the NIT in these opening rounds either, just because, I mean, I know the home court is factored in, but it's like they're going to these venues that they're not familiar with, so it's a little bit more difficult, but I still think that the spot, I would agree with the move there, and I would lean to taking the points with Samford based on the spot, even though they do have the worst defense. They're at least getting points, and they are the better scoring team. North Alabama and Bradley, I agree with this move as well. Bradley down from 4 to 3.5, 68% of tickets, 58% of the cash coming in on North Alabama, though, even though the ticket percentage is on Bradley. Again, North Alabama is the road team, though, and they're going to a kind of unfamiliar environment. But the thing about North Alabama is they're new to Division I, and I think they just got Division I postseason eligibility, so they were not eligible for the NCAA tournament or the NIT up until, I think, either this year or last year. And I don't think they've ever been to, I don't know if they've been to the NIT or not, because that depends on your eligibility. This year would have been the first time they got into the NCAA tournament. Both of these teams lost in their conference finals. North Alabama lost to Lipscomb. Bradley lost to Drake. And both kind of were out of the game by the end of it. They both kind of lost by like a double-digit margin, if I remember correctly. I think North Alabama might have a little bit more motivation here just because they're like such a new program to D1. I think even if they miss out on the tournament, they'll be excited to play in whatever game they get to play in the postseason. So they get to play in the NIT. Yeah, I think they actually will be excited to continue playing and actually get a postseason game. Bradley, probably a little bit more of the disappointed team, but also Bradley, a bit overrated. I mean, KenPom has them 18th in luck, which isn't great. Although Bradley will slow the pace down. North Alabama likes to try to go, I believe, a little bit faster than that. Let me see. Where are they? Oh, they're right there. My cursor was right there. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I looking at? No, North Alabama, they do play also kind of slow. Bradley a little bit slower than that. Bradley is the better team defensively, and they're both similar offensively, so I don't know. I'm going to pass on the game, but that's what's going on in that one. I will play this other one that's at the same time, Florida Atlantic. This says it's at Dayton. It's not actually at Dayton, though. This game is at Boca Raton in Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic's hosting this. I don't know why it says it's at Dayton. This is on ESPN2, actually. So this is one of the television games. So I think Florida Atlantic actually is going to be up for this game because they get to host a TV game here. And you're looking at this game, the line is basically a pick 'em price, basically pick the winner. I think the public's going to come in and look at this and think Dayton's like, they got the significantly better record over FAU, and you're just saying pick the winner, even though it is at FAU. Like, why would you want to take FAU here? But I do. Again, I don't know why it says Dayton's the home team, because this is at Boca Raton, as I just said. I don't even know which team is the higher seeded team in that one. NIT does some weird things. Market read looks all over Florida Atlantic, which is what first caught my eye. Florida Atlantic flipped from a 1.5-point dog to a 1-point favorite. 67% of tickets and only 56% of the cash on Dayton. So Dayton actually looks like they're a public road underdog here, and that is basically the way that underdogs die, essentially. That is not really where you want to be. Hopefully the market read stays that way. With reverse line movement against it, it's still basically a pick-em price. There are money line, like some small money lines out there. You can find like minus 102 even out there, getting them at a slight discount there. So that's the way that I would play it on the money line, Florida Atlantic. I mean, I'm not going to beat you up if you lay a 1 point with FAU either, but of course, if you push, I mean, if they win by 1, you'll push rather than winning. So it is a little bit more advantageous to play the money line here, but I like how this sets up, man. FAU, I know they were a program that was used to playing in the tournament, but now like Dusty May is gone, so they lost him. They lost Vlad Golden, their big man. And they kind of had to adjust to not having those guys anymore. You know, it's a new team here. And I think they actually didn't have that bad of a season, and they kind of underperformed. And Ken Baum is telling you they're better than they look, as he has them at 230th in luck. Even though they played in the American Athletic, they played a decently strong schedule, almost in the top 100 in schedule strength, because they played a pretty decent non-conference schedule, 62nd strongest non-conference schedule. They're in the top 100 in defense, so that's not bad. So they have a decent defense. That's tempo. What am I saying? Top 100 in offense, excuse me. They have a decent offense. Their defense does leave something to be desired, but because they're fast, they're playing at home, and they're a bit of an undervalued commodity, in my opinion. And again, like the line, a pick 'em price, it just looks way too easy to take Dayton, and everybody knows both teams' names, but I think Dayton was like kind of discussed as like a bubble team this year. So I think Dayton, they really kind of had their sights set on making the tournament. They made the tournament last year. So I think they're more disappointed, even though I know FAU made the tournament last year as well. But that was that Dusty May FAU team that was kind of ending the end of that like couple-year era for FAU there, whereas Dayton, I think they kind of expected to be playing in the tournament again. They came into the season, I think, expecting to win the A-10. Didn't pan out that way. They're definitely not a bad team, and I think they've been a little bit underrated this year too. But Ken Baum, even though, they faced a pretty difficult schedule as well, comparable to FAU's. Dayton, 94th in luck, man. So Ken Baum telling you that Dayton has actually overperformed a little bit. They also profile similarly to FAU, even though they are the slightly better team. Dayton, also decent offensively, not as good defensively, but they also play really, really slow. And FAU is going to try to speed them up. And, of course, FAU is the home team. So the odds makers are not telling you that FAU is the better team, obviously, as they're not getting a full home court advantage here. Like the home court factoring into this line tells you that Dayton would probably be about a 3-point favorite on a neutral. But I think the home court kind of pushes this over the edge. I think FAU had lesser expectations this year, losing their coach and losing their best big man. I don't think they really expected to do that much this year, and they still were decently competitive and better than what their record would indicate. So we'll go with Florida Atlantic. I think they are a bit of the more motivated team, and I think the fact that they get to host an ESPN2 game and it's technically a postseason game, I think they're going to be more excited about it, man. Meanwhile, Dayton's home arena is being hijacked and taken over at the same time tonight by the first 4 games. So that's what's going on there. And by the way, the first 4, Alabama State won. And that first game, that was not a very good basketball game necessarily, but it was a close finish, man. Alabama State with that crazy win at the end of that, just heaving it full court basically in a tied game after St. Francis hit a 3 to retie the game. A half-court heave, and somehow Alabama State comes up with it and is able to put the ball in the basket before the buzzer. Crazy ending to that one. And then North Carolina, I wish I played North Carolina last night, man. I told you I leaned that way, but I was just worried that San Diego State, the slow-down style, the defense would keep them in that game. But I thought North Carolina had the motivation because everybody was saying you guys shouldn't be here, and they absolutely blasted San Diego State last night. Man, North Carolina, I don't like that because I kind of want to take North Carolina at least in the first game in the actual bracket to win that 6-11 matchup or whatever, but now they're not like under the radar anymore because everybody just saw them blow out San Diego State. Maybe they won't give them that much credit for blowing out a first 4 team, though. Maybe it'll still be like, well, now you're playing in the actual tournament, guys. We'll talk about that when I get to it. I still might want to bet North Carolina there. I wish I did last night. Furman is at North Texas here. Furman, they almost got back to the tournament, man. After they were there 2 years ago, they were in the SoCon final here, so they might be a little bit disappointed. North Texas was an earlier out in their turn. I think they were out in the semifinals, though, so North Texas actually played more recently than Furman did, I think, because Furman, I think their conference final was maybe a day or two before North Texas's. Or a day or two before North Texas got bounced in their semifinal game, which was on Saturday. I might be wrong about that, but I think Furman finished before that. But North Texas is up from 7.5 to 8.5 here. 71% of tickets, 78% of the cash coming into North Texas. Both these teams play slow, and North Texas, not only are they a slow-down style, but they just play really low-scoring, ugly games. So you can see based on the total here, even though it's moving up, it is a low total. So that is going to make it more difficult for North Texas to cover a number here, even though I don't necessarily disagree with that move because I think Furman may be the more disappointed of the two teams after they were so close to winning the SoCon, went basically right to the wire against Wofford. North Texas, it's going to be difficult for them to cover a number like that just with the style that they play, so I'll stay away. Northern Iowa at SMU. SMU's a 10-point favorite. They're hosting that game. 65% of the tickets coming in at SMU. SMU might be a 1 seed in this NIT. I'm not even sure, but they are one of the more disappointed teams, I think, because they were, even though they're new to the ACC, they had a pretty decent record, a decent-looking resume this year, although the ACC is just too weak. They didn't have enough big wins on their resume, so I think when it came down to it, they knew they weren't going to get in, but they were still a bubble team for a while, so they might still be a bit disappointed. 65% of the tickets coming in on them, 51% of the cash coming in on Northern Iowa, though. Northern Iowa, I think, might be the more embarrassed team here because they lost, I believe they lost to Valpo in their conference tournament in the Missouri Valley. That's a pretty embarrassing loss, losing to Valpo. Just, I don't know how they're going to fare going on the road to an unfamiliar venue in SMU, but I do agree with the cash percentage in that one as well. I agree with taking the points with Northern Iowa there because I think they're going to be the more embarrassed team. SMU played a close game in their ACC tournament as well, which I think was after Northern Iowa was already bounced, so Northern Iowa has more rest as well and coming off that embarrassing game. SMU had a close game against Clemson, so I would take the points with Northern Iowa or pass on that one. Northern Colorado and UC Irvine. So now we're getting into these late games where these teams are going to have to go out to the Pacific Coast. Although for Northern Colorado and Utah Valley, that's not as much of a time difference, only going from the mountain time out to the Pacific Coast. Those teams are a bit more used to it being in the Big Sky and the WAC. There are some Pacific Coast time teams in those conferences, I'm pretty sure. UC Irvine, 7.5-point favorite, down to reduce juice, but 63% of tickets, 67% of the cash coming in on Irvine. Irvine is the better team. I mean, maybe they expected to win the Big West again and get back to the tournament. They lost in the final, obviously, to UC San Diego, who is a very good team this year. No shame in that. So I don't know how disappointed UC Irvine will be, but Northern Colorado, they were the top team in the Big Sky, and they got mildly upset by Montana in their final. So both of these teams coming in losing their finals, you could argue that both of them are similarly disappointed. And maybe Northern Colorado having to go to an unfamiliar environment will be what is the determining factor here. I do think UC Irvine is the better team. I mean, as you can see, the line is indicating that. Utah Valley, who I think has been pretty overrated this year, they wound up losing their WAC final to Grand Canyon. I don't know if Utah Valley, I mean, once they got to that final, I think they expected to win it. They were winning early in that game. That was on Saturday, I think Saturday night. So I think they're probably a pretty disappointed team. Whereas San Francisco is going to have a rest advantage. Utah Valley has to go out to San Francisco. San Francisco is also very good at home this year. San Francisco lost, I believe, in the semifinals of the WCC, so they finished before Utah Valley did. They lost to Gonzaga. Not really shame in that. Gonzaga, obviously a good team. San Francisco up from 7 to 7.5, but 71% of tickets, only 64% of the cash coming in on San Francisco. I would still lean to the San Francisco side there. I agree with the move and not really with the cash percentage there. I think it's a tough spot for Utah Valley. San Fran is the better team with more rest, maybe the less disappointed team, and is much better at home. So some advantages to San Francisco there. And then Loyola Chicago at San Jose State. This line makes it look way too easy to take Loyola Chicago, man. So I would look to fade them in this game. You got to figure out, San Jose State, though, they've been dealing with injuries this year, so you got to figure out if they have some of those guys back. I don't know if they do. I don't know their personnel that well, but I know they've been dealing with some injuries. Loyola Chicago, I mean, you look at their records, they have a nice-looking record. San Jose State's record is awful, like below 500, so it's like the line's almost just a pick-the-winner price, so it's like, why would anybody want to take San Jose State here? But that is the way that I would lean. Loyola Chicago up from 2 to 3, 65% of tickets, only 53% of the cash. Loyola Chicago, I think, made it deeper in their A10 tournament than San Jose State did in the Mountain West. So San Jose State has rest, and they're at home. And for Loyola Chicago, who's like a central time zone team, having to go out west and play an 11 p.m. Eastern game, that's going to mess with their biological clock, man. That is a late game. I think they might not respond well to that. They're going to a very unfamiliar venue to them. San Jose State, I think both of these teams like to slow the pace down. So there's not that much to look at there. Yeah, both teams are slow-paced teams. Loyola Chicago, 43rd in luck, though. So Ken Baum is telling you they are a pretty overrated team. Like they're actually not as good as the record would indicate. Whereas San Jose State, a little bit lower in luck at 155th. So they're kind of middle of the pack. Like basically, they're about as good as you think they are. But Loyola is the more overrated team. But the spot is just crazy, man. Having to go out to the Pacific Coast. I face a team that plays even slower than they do in a bad biological clock time for them. I don't like it. And again, they played, I think, more recently in the A10 tournament. I think they lost to VCU, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but they lost some pretty close game, I think. And I think it might have been in the semifinals, too. So San Jose State got bounced early in their tournament. I think it was they lost to some superior team to them. I forget who they lost to. Their first game in the Mountain West tournament, and that tournament only took them to Vegas, so they're really just kind of staying out in the Pacific time zone this whole time. So the travel spot is a lot better for them. 66% of tickets on Loyola, only 54% of the cash on Loyola. So I would take the points with San Jose State in that one. Hopefully, we're not going to see a situation where a bunch of my leans are correct and my actual play is wrong. Now I'm going to jinx it, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But I hate when that happens, man. So hopefully it does not. Looking at NHL, we only have 2 games on the NHL card here, Colorado and Toronto. I don't know if I agree with the market indicators on this one, with Colorado up from minus 115 to minus 117, 56% of tickets, 97% of the cash. So the money moving on Colorado. Coming in on Colorado. Colorado's coming off a big win over Dallas, though. And now they are starting a road trip. I know when you start a road trip, you usually are focused. It's a good Toronto team that they're playing. Usually want to get that road trip off on the right foot. They do have 2 days off here, but still, coming off beating Dallas in overtime, that's a big win, man. So I don't know if it's really the greatest spot for them. If they were coming off an uglier game and they were starting a road trip, I would agree it would be a more positive spot for them. Toronto coming off an easy win over Calgary. They only had 1 day off. They're staying at home, so not a bad spot for Toronto either here. They do have the Rangers up next, which maybe they consider a bigger game, which is tomorrow because that's an Eastern Conference game. Toronto pretty well set in that they're definitely going to make the playoffs. Both of these teams are playoffs. So, I mean, these teams are both kind of just playing with, like, seeding in mind at this point. So no real, like, motivational edge as far as, like, getting into the playoffs is concerned or anything like that. Both of these teams are going to make the playoffs. Seattle's at Minnesota. Minnesota's pretty, I think, secure in their playoff spot as well. They're down from minus 170 to minus 155. So the money coming in against Minnesota, I mean, what else is new? As I keep telling you, Minnesota's not as good as their record looks. Seattle's on a back-to-back, though. I mean, they had a pretty easy game last night in their win over Chicago, but it is still a back-to-back, and I don't love playing teams in back-to-backs. It's a third game in 4 days for them all in different cities after taking Winnipeg into overtime and then beating Chicago. And then they have Edmonton up next, which is also a bigger game. So for Seattle, don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to have their full focus on Minnesota, although it is a quick road revenge spot for Seattle. They did lose to Minnesota 4-3 back on March 4th. So I guess take from that what you will. And then Minnesota, as far as they're concerned, they're coming off a nice win as well over LA. So I don't know that they're in really the greatest spot either. Not really a spot where I want to play either team. And that's pretty much the deal there. Not playing anything in the hockey games today. Very short hockey slate. NBA, we have a big slate. I'm going to try to make this brief because some of these games just like, who cares, man? Some of these games just injured teams. We don't really care. I'll start with Houston-Orlando because I'm going to play Houston money line, minus 150, which I think is a fairly cheap price on Houston. They are up from minus 1.5 to 3, although actually you might be able to find a better money line, or if this line starts dropping again, maybe closer to like the 2 range, I might reverse course and maybe lay the points instead. But I want to play the Rockets in some way here just because I think the spot is very, very good for them and very bad for the Magic. But we will see. 86% of tickets are on the Rockets, but 53% of the cash coming in on the Magic. I don't love that cash discrepancy with the cash coming in on the Magic. I don't love the fact that these teams did just play each other in Houston. Houston won that game. I mean, Houston is the better team at this point. So what else can you say about that? So I'm not as worried about it being really a revenge spot there. But Houston was a 3.5 point home favorite in that game. and now they're a 3-point road favorite. So it's like, well, why is that the case? What's the deal? Why is this line almost the same as it was at home? What changed? Well, there must have been some personnel changes, right? And you can see here, one of the main things is that Houston didn't have Van Vliet, and I believe he's probably going to play in this game. I think he's back. So I think that's one of the main differences. I mean, he's their point guard. He's the guy that drives their offense. So he is back now playing full minutes. So he's been back for a little while now. So they're kind of used to having him back. So I think that's good. And I think that kind of explains, because otherwise Houston would have been a bigger favorite at home if they had a full lineup. So I think most of the reason for the line difference is that Houston has some of their players back. Orlando, I know they've been an injured team all year. Suggs is not coming back. They do have Banchero and Wagner back, but they've just been a struggling team, man. But they're coming off a huge win over Cleveland, a big upset win at Cleveland. So I'm going to look to fade Orlando coming off of that. I mean, that was a big win at Cleveland. And not only that, but now they're finishing a road trip, although I know they had 2 days off, and they don't have a big game up next. And yes, this is revenge, but when you're coming off a huge win like that, they played pretty close against Minnesota the game before that too, and they played 3 games in 4 days. I think when you have that extra day off, it actually has a tendency to distract you a little bit more, because you get back into home life, you have stuff to do, you kind of get back into it at home, you kind of get settled back in at home, and I think it kind of distracts you from playing the basketball game. But beating Cleveland was huge, man. They were a 10.5-point underdog in this game, and I know Orlando is fighting to try to get into the playoffs. That's how bad the Eastern Conference is. Orlando is actually in one of the play-in spots right now, but they have a decent padding over Chicago and Miami. I mean, yeah, they got to be concerned a little bit because they do want to host one of these play-in games, which as long as they're the 7 or the 8, I think that is how that works. I think they will. So they're not going to drop down below Chicago by losing one game here, although it would make the situation a little bit more tentative. But I don't think the motivation, yeah, sure, they're going to have motivation to try to ensure that, but I think Houston's going to have motivation here as well, man. Houston is playing for the 2 seed, and that means avoiding Golden State in the first round. So I think Houston, even though it might mean playing Minnesota, I think they would rather play the winner of a play-in game and just take that, just take the luck of the draw, basically, even though they did lose to Minnesota the last time they played them. They beat them the time before that. I think they want to avoid this new Golden State team with Butlers and really, really hot there. So I think Houston does have reason to play as well, as they're basically in a tie for the 2 seed right now in the West with Denver, I believe. Houston also, I think they're going to be motivated because they're starting a 2-game road trip. I think Orlando might be actually the better of these 2 teams, the team that you might be focused on at this point, because Miami, without Butler, they're just starting to struggle. Houston, also, they're coming off barely winning at home against this shell of a Philadelphia team with basically nobody left playing for Philadelphia. Philadelphia took them into overtime as 16.5-point favorites. Houston was on their own court. So now you have a situation where you have a good team, the Houston Rockets, starting a road trip, and they're coming off of a scare at home as a giant favorite. So when you get a good team like that off a scare like that and they refocus, that is a spot that you want to look for, man. So I like the spot for Houston. I think the spot's pretty bad for Orlando, even though, yeah, they might be focused with Houston being a good team coming to their place, but I just don't like it. I think Houston probably matches up well against Orlando, too, which is part of the reason why Houston won that game. Although Houston is definitely better at home, but Orlando has just really struggled this season to overcome those injuries. It just has not coalesced for them, and I don't think they've been that great at home either. Let me see. Yeah, they're only 18-16 at home. Houston is actually better on the road than the Magic are at home. 18-14, even though Houston is much better at home than on the road. Orlando just has not been very good at home. Although you're not really getting a whole lot of line value with Houston here, which is why I was like, we should maybe look to the money line here. But if we get on the money coming in on Orlando a little bit, and I don't agree with that, and this line drops back down towards the pick-em price a little bit, then I think, yeah, you can lay the points with Houston. But I just think the spot is too good to pass up in that one. Detroit is at Miami. Miami coming off just an ugly loss at New York. They're returning home, but only from a 2-game road trip. So it might be a spot where you're going to see Miami refocus a little bit here after that ugly loss. Detroit just blasted New Orleans. I mean, when you beat anybody by 46 points, you might be feeling a little bit high on yourself, man. So maybe it's not the greatest spot for Detroit here. They are up from 3 to 5.5 here, but 74% of tickets on them, 56% of the cash coming in on the Heat. So the cash percentage is coming in on the Heat. You're getting extra value on them at this point. I don't think it's a strong, really lean or anything like that. Maybe a slight lean to Miami there. A lot of these games are just double-digit spreads, man. I just don't really care. But that's an ESPN game, so if you're going to talk about Detroit-Miami, it's an okay game. The game that everybody wants to see, though, is Denver at LA, which is on ESPN tonight. And the odds makers are telling you this is probably the biggest game of the night. I mean, it is, but not for my money's sake. But the odds makers are actually telling you the Nuggets are actually the better team. They've gone from a 2.5-point dog to a 1-point favorite. And I know part of that is because LeBron is still out. We know that. Does that mean that Luka is also out here? It might. I mean, this is a game where you really have to pay attention to the injury report, man, because Luka is a game-time decision right now. I think Jokic is. So I think the Nuggets have some game-time decisions on their end as well. But the odds seem to be telling you you're probably going to get Jokic in this game because the Nuggets are favored on the road here. Again, it's flipped from a 2.5-point dog to a 1-point favorite. So I think if the Lakers, it's maybe got to indicate that Luka's not playing because maybe he will, but if the Lakers had him, you would think they'd probably be maybe a small favorite, but I don't know, because what do the Lakers get for home court? Like maybe 2.5? Like that's about the strongest that you're going to get in the NBA. They probably have one of the stronger home courts. But the Nuggets have really dominated the series, so I would probably lean to the Nuggets here. They do have 55% of the cash on them, 53% of tickets on LA. But again, LA, I mean, after they were hot after the Luka trade, they did kind of fall into a spiral here, although Boston, Milwaukee, Denver, those are all good teams. They lost to those teams. They did beat Phoenix in a bad spot. Lakers are in a bad spot. I faded the Lakers in both these games and lost both plays against Phoenix and San Antonio. Unfortunately, San Antonio almost got back to within that number by the end of it. Those were not good spots for the Lakers, and they still beat them. They still covered in those. I was kind of surprised because no LeBron. Luka's new to the team. Lakers had Denver up next, so surprising. So, yeah, they played well, so that does show me something, I guess, that the Lakers were able to play well there. This is revenge for the Lakers because they just lost at Denver, but that was revenge for Denver because Denver had lost at Denver to the Lakers the game before that. Denver still has only lost like 2 of the last 10 games against the Lakers or something like that, although now we're talking about the Lakers with Luka and with no LeBron, which is different than the Lakers have been, of course. So I don't know if Luka's actually playing in this game or not, but the odds makers are kind of telling you something with that line, man. Lining Denver as a favorite, even though they're on the road. Odds makers telling you that Denver is the better team, at least in their current state in this matchup. So again, I would still tend to lean that way. Lakers coming off an easy win, though, and not traveling. And Denver's coming off a big win over Golden State. So the spot isn't really advantageous to Denver, though. So that's kind of the problem there. So maybe I shouldn't lean with the market there because the situation actually lines up better on LA. And Cleveland is at Sacramento. I mean, I guess I'll talk about this one as well before I get out of here. I have a little bit of time. Cleveland, they just lost pretty badly at the Clippers, man. I think they were in a hangover spot because they lost to Orlando. And I told you, man, a lot of times when a team loses a long win streak like this and they're not used to that, it can hang them over into the next game, even though that was the start of a road trip. I think that was the case there with that game against the Clippers. But now I think Cleveland's on a back-to-back. Am I right about that? Yeah, they're on a back-to-back, 3 games in 4 days, 4 games in 6 days, all in different cities. So it's still a difficult scheduling spot, man. It is possible they actually drop another game here because the spot is just really, really difficult here for them as far as them having a lot of games in quick succession. Sacramento just beat Memphis, so I don't really want to come off Sacramento off a nice big win like that. Although, of course, when you got Cleveland coming into your place, you're going to be focused, though. And Sacramento does have a bit of a rest advantage and travel advantage as they're staying at home, and they had 2 days off before that Memphis game, so definitely a scheduling advantage to the Kings there. Cavs down from 5.5 to 5. They're going to be very public. Public expecting, there's no way they're going to lose 3 games in a row, right? They're going to bounce back, but I don't know if that's really the way to look there. 94% of tickets, 99% of the cash on Cleveland. I don't know if the cash percentage is going to work out that way. It looks like they're public, and the line is kind of moving against them, so I would lean to the Sacramento side. My plays, though, one more time, are in the NIT Florida Atlantic money line. minus 102. And then in the NBA, Houston either on the money line at minus 150 or better, or lay minus 2 or better, I would say on that. We'll see what I can get on that one. And then, yeah, MLB, I apologize for these. I said Korea, my mistake. It's actually in Japan, my mistake. It's in Tokyo. Same thing they did last year. The last year, I also made a mistake. Last year, it was not the Cubs and the Dodgers. It was Yamamoto. I mentioned that yesterday. Yamamoto was really bad in his first Major League start, which was in the Tokyo game last year, but it was against San Diego. So my mistake there. This game is the Cubs. So I think San Diego had Yu Darvish pitching in the game. So it's still like Japanese pitchers, Asian pitchers being represented in these games. Of course, the Dodgers have had 2 Japanese pitchers go with Yamamoto and now Sasaki. But he was making his Major League debut here. So I think he had some nerves. He actually walked 5 guys in the game, even though he only gave up 1 run, I think, in his start here. They pulled him after, I think, 3 innings. He didn't do that badly. 5 walks, I think, was due to the nerves. I think Sasaki, he's a good pickup for the Dodgers. They're absolutely stacked this year. I think he will be good. And I think it was good that he got his nerves out of the way in this game, and they're going to win the game anyway. Steele actually gave up 5 runs. Justin Steele, he's a good pitcher, man. He's got... he really only throws fastballs, but he changes the movement on the fastball, so it's all different fastball movement from him, and some of them kind of change speed as well. So even though the Dodgers were public, line reverse moved against them. The Dodgers did win the first game. It looks like they're probably going to win this game as well. It's in the 8th inning now. It was a 6 a.m. Eastern start time again. I believe it's a 7 p.m. game tomorrow, or later today, I guess, technically, in Japan, because they're ahead of us. But Steele actually had the better strikeout walk ratio in the game with a 5-1 strikeout walk ratio. I think Sasaki, maybe he didn't have 5 walks, maybe it was 3 walks. He walked a bunch of guys, though. So his strikeout walk ratio wasn't good in the game, but still, I think, again, it was due to nerves, it being his first game. I didn't want to play anything in this game. I should have played the under in the first game. I totally missed out on that. In this game, I didn't want to play it just because you didn't know what you were going to get out of Sasaki in his Major League debut. Kind of a little bit of a dangerous spot, even though I know a lot of times when you're in the middle of the season, you get guys that get brought up from the minors. I like to play those guys, but it's a little bit different when you have a guy that's being brought over from Japan. There can be the nerves there, whereas I think if you have a guy who's kind of proven himself throughout the minors, and he has really good stuff, it's a little bit of an advantage, although it could have been a little bit of an advantage to Sasaki here as well, in that Major League hitters haven't seen this guy before, so that's kind of the advantage. That's why I like to play on starters in their Major League debuts a lot, because they have the advantage that the hitters haven't seen them before, so they haven't adjusted to them. So that was an advantage to Sasaki in this game. I just wasn't sure how it was going to go, and these Tokyo games are tricky. Maybe a little bit more pressure on him trying to perform in front of his home crowd, although, of course, he is in his home country here doing it, so he is used to pitching in Japan, but he's used to pitching against Japanese hitters with Japanese league rules, which are a bit different. So that's pretty much all I got to say. Actual MLB in the States starts next week. I hate this international shit, to be honest. It makes for some kind of difficult betting opportunities there, so we'll see what happens once MLB starts. It's been one of my better sports to bet, one of the best, actually. I think NBA has been my best, and then MLB has been my second best over, the entire time I've been doing this. So, and in recent years as well. Last year was bad for MLB, so we'll try to readjust to that and bounce back from that. But that's going to do it for me, man. Tower Gang Tone on Twitter. Tower Gang tonight, 9:11 p.m. Eastern, the most hilarious podcast out there, man. It'll distract me from trying to watch Texas and Xavier. Oh, I forgot to talk about Texas and Xavier. And the other game, let me just hit those real quick. I guess I have a few minutes before I get out of here. Mount St. Mary's an American, the 16th seed playing the first game up. I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about the tournament games. American up from 2 to 2.5. 65% of tickets and only 55% of the cash on Mount St. Mary's. I know American, I've been saying they're overrated this year, but I think they're better than Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's out of the MAAC, one of the mid-tier seeds in that conference as well. American, they shoot pretty well, and they slow the pace down, I'm pretty sure, which might throw Mount St. Mary's off a little bit, even though they're not very good either. The Patriot League is actually really bad as well. But when you see a public underdog like this, it's usually not the way that you want to go. And like last night, even though Alabama State, they didn't cover, they did win the game. They were the team that doesn't turn it over much, and St. Francis is the team that turns it over. Mount St. Mary's is a very turnover-prone team, and American is not. So that's another advantage to American there. But American shoots better than Alabama State does. Xavier up from 1-3 in the game that kind of matters more, playing into an 11 seed to get to face Illinois, I think is who awaits the winner of this. Money coming in on Xavier, 57% of tickets up from 1-3 with juice. The line really moving on Xavier. 54% of tickets on Texas. Very strange that Texas being public isn't strange. Xavier, like the line moving on them and then being a 3, almost 4-point favorite is what I find strange because KenPom has these teams almost even. So I think there is some line value taking Texas here. I don't understand why Xavier is this much of a favorite other than the fact that Xavier got bounced earlier in the Big East tournament, and Texas had some pretty difficult games just to get into this thing in the Big 12 tournament. They pulled off an upset of, who was it, Texas A&M maybe? And then they went into overtime, I think, against Tennessee, or maybe, I forget which, the Texas A&M game was the overtime game. I think it was double overtime. And then they played decently against Tennessee as well. So Texas did have more of a grind in the SEC tournament. So they're maybe the more fatigued team, but I'm not sure that the line should really be this high, man. I mean, Texas is the more battle-tested team. I think they've been underperforming basically all year. You know how many times I've bet Texas this year, and it's been probably less than a 50-50 proposition for me, but they're getting points here. I know sometimes they frustrate me when they're getting points and they blow the game towards the end, but they've definitely been better as an underdog than a favorite, though, even though they've won a couple of times for me as a favorite, too. But as an underdog getting points, the team that faced a more difficult schedule here, even though they are less rested, I mean, it's not like they're going to not try to show up for this game. I mean, this is win and you advance into the tournament. So, Texas does have a little bit more experience, I think, than Xavier does as well. Even though Xavier does still have Fremantle, I think Texas does actually have the more talent there and more experience, and they have the more experienced, I think, coach at this point as well. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we'll see. Their coach has been new, I think, recently, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but whatever. That's the way that I lean in that one. That's going to do it, man. Once again, I forgot to share my screen on that. I apologize, but patreon.com/TowerGang, and you get bonus content. You'll get to see the bonus content tonight, 9:11 p.m., baby. Tower Gang. Peace.